Talk Show.
Okay, welcome, Joe. I just get yourself situated.
Good afternoon.
Did you just get back from Quebec, just now?
2 minutes ago.
2 minutes ago, eh? So
Actually, I was in Quebec and I went to Ottawa and I got back from Ottawa last night.
Oh, now you're bragging.
No. Exotic Ottawa.
Oh, exotic or exhausted?
Whatever.
A little bit of both. Eh? Exotic Ottawa. They used to say they rolled up the sidewalks at 5 p.m.
They have sidewalks?
Well, but back in the day, maybe they didn't. But when I was there, they did, but they rolled them up. Everything closed down. It's a government town. It does not much of a nightlife, and I guess that's why everybody says, well, go to Hull.
Well, there's pockets here and there of excitement in the city.
All right. Speaking of excitement, the last time we were talking, it was all about Highway 30, and it was all about Bill. Was it 51? No, not
85.
85.
Yes.
About the economic development along the Highway 30 corridor, and so there was a flurry of letter writing, calls, and so on. So you did finally actually get a chance to meet with the Premier. What was the substance of that? What's the takeaway?
Well, I will say part of it was not so much disappointing, but not unexpected in terms of the understanding of, I guess, the relationship or lack of it that we have in certain areas. To be more specific, in the area of, I'll start with major issue, it's taxation.
Mm-hmm.
And the Premier is very clear that, Quebec citizens must abide by the law. Therefore, no matter where they go, they have to pay taxes, and somebody has to collect those taxes, and somebody has to remit it, meaning, Kahnawake, and businesses here. And he was pretty adamant on that. But I made it clear. I said, look, we've had a long-standing position in Kahnawake. I said it goes back hundreds of years. It's not something new. It didn't just start,
Mm-hmm.
in recent years. I said it's been long-standing. We've had battles over that. And basically that we do not collect taxes. We do not remit taxes. We are not going to be your taxpayers. I said, and the same message holds true with the federal government too. So kind of a standoff there, if you will, at this point. But he did state that he wanted to further explore the possibilities of what we could do. And I said, that's fine. I said, but if you come in with this position, that, the Quebecers have to pay taxes and no matter where they go, what you consider the province of Quebec, he made it clear. He says, if we go to Europe, he says, we have people that go and work in Europe and elsewhere. They still have to pay provincial tax on their earnings and things of that nature. So I said, well, that's fine, but you're in Kahnawake, different circumstance here. We've held that position all along, right through, and that's not going to change. So that was part of the initial, what I would call exchange that we had. But prior to that, the first thing I wanted to talk about, was relationship. This whole idea of nation to nation, what you consider to be nation to nation, and what we consider to be nation. And I did actually have a replica of the 2-row. I laid that out on the table, and I said, and explained what that is. And I says, this is the original understanding we have between the French, between the British. I says, our ancestors, your ancestors, when they entered our territory, this is what we agreed to. We would not interfere with each other, so on and so forth, polishing the chain. And if we don't polish the chain, it rusts, it breaks, it means war, I says, we come close very close, and at times, I said, even including in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that far removed that things like that could happen. He said he liked the concept, he liked the idea. So I believe there is some manner of opening, perhaps an understanding, but I don't know how far that's going to go. Because he's not really answerable or responsible for us. He's got his own constituents. And as we saw, you made a cabinet shuffle based on the fact that a lot of pressure was being brought to bear. And I'm not making any excuses for them. That's just their system.
Yeah.
But ours is consistently the same thing all the way through. So highway, we brought up Highway 30. We spoke about that. The bill that they had tabled in the House, 85. And to me, either they're ignoring the fact that this land, the scenery, all of that, belongs to us. Does not belong to them. It may be under somebody's management or administration at this point in time in the provincial government, but it is our territory. Otherwise, why would they have made a deal, to continue to complete Highway 30 expansion to Highway 15 and say we'll give you back land? If they didn't recognize that, then you don't make the deal.
Yeah.
So the response to that is well, when you settle with the federal government, you make your settlement with the federal government, then I guess whatever comes of that will come of it. In the meantime, we want to plan economic development initiatives on Highway 30 or in and around that area. We want you to be a part of it, so on and so forth. And I look at that as it's nice to hear that they want us to be part of the development, but you know what? You're buying into somebody else's concept, somebody else's idea that they own the land.
Yeah, well, at least one of the things is that, right at the beginning when you started to speak about and use the term Quebecers, I can only think that in his usage of that terminology, he is implying what's implicit in all of that is that we are Quebec citizens also, and therefore subject to those laws, be it tax or so on. And anything along those things, if you talk about Bill 85, then just like any other Quebecers, any other Quebec community, then you can participate in it. That's the sense I get, which is in between those lines.
Well, there's he did qualify certain things in terms of saying, well, this, you have certain advantages, which are only it's only that are protected and recognized. He didn't refer specifically to the Indian Act, but where there's tax exemptions, but that's for your people. It's not for Quebecers. So he made the distinction.
Yeah.
In Kahnawake, I guess you can do what you want and everything amongst yourselves and not have to pay the tax. But when it comes to dealing with, he said, his citizens, then you have to there has to be a compliance.
Yeah.
And that's what he's trying to get at. How do we work out a compliance?
To what degree? I just wonder too whether into their argument, the Quebec argument is well, to what degree does Kahnawake already comply with that? In other words, if people work from outside, say at the hospital, they may work at council. Do we collect taxes and remit from their pay and remit it to the government?
I don't think there's anybody anywhere in Kahnawake right now, or any organization that does that.
It's up to the employee to do it.
It's up to the employee, and I believe they're all complying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not a concern of ours, or in order to take over that apparatus, the application of it.
No, I may be wrong. There may be somebody somewhere that has some arrangement that they're doing right now. I mean, we have I've used the figure 1,000 non-natives a day that come in here, that are private contractors, professionals, doctors, lawyers.
Yeah.
And they work in all they're educators. They work in all our systems here.
Yeah, and the thing to me is it becomes, and obviously that's you're there, but for all the mom and pops in the community, for them to have to all of a sudden start to say if a non-native comes in, have their setup include taxing them and then be responsible to remitting it to them, is really a burden that we really don't need.
Well, you can expect that anywhere where there's a large non-native clientele, that they're going to start going, like golf courses, some of the major restaurants who have been pretty successful, who attract a lot of non-native people to come to those restaurants. you can expect that they'll start to become a target, if you will. And I did bring that up. I said, that's a concern we have. All of a sudden, you're going to be, never mind just going after the alcohol, the tobacco, and anything else, you're going to start concentrating in those areas over there. I said, and that's unacceptable. I said, that's not something that we're going to stand for. So, yes, we need a solution, but it's not going to be a one-sided solution as it has been now.
So the door at least has been open to a discussion.
Yeah, it has been. And then with the scenery lands and Highway 30, the law that they passed, or they're proposing to pass and implement, made it very clear that that's unacceptable. And if we have to, we have our own means of battling that. It is not just dialoguing at the table. There are other things that we can do that could make things very tough. Yeah. Tough on us, but tough on you. They're sort of surrounding us, in terms of saying, you become part of the development, but not under the conditions that it's your land. It's still in their, and at some point in time in the future, when it gets settled, then it's a fait accompli, as they say in French.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what a fait accompli is, we're going to take a break right now. But I want to come back and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. You're listening to K103's Partyline Talk Show. My guest is Grand Chief Joe Tokwiro Norton. We'll be back with more after these messages.
Many people who are having thoughts of suicide send out signs consciously or even unconsciously. Things like...
Welcome back to today's Partyline Talk Show. Ross Montour. It's my guest for the full hour is Grand Chief Joe Tokwiro Norton, and this is MCK Friday. When we were talking last, before I was rudely interrupted by my own finger, we were talking about Highway 30 and lands. One of the things that, we get back to the land thing, I thought this whole thing was sort of already kind of figured out, is that because they were sitting at the table. I know that their position has always been, it's that they were here before us. And therefore, we came from the Mohawk Valley, and so we weren't really here, and so the land's not really ours.
Well, even if you go by that case, why and that situation, why then did the Jesuits come and ask Kahnawake to be able to lease land out to the European farmers that were here, the French? They asked us to do that.
Yeah.
And this was territory that we've always occupied, as far as I'm concerned. And gradually, over time, that has been undermined by the various acts of the French regime, then the British regime, which took over after that, then the Canadian regime, and then the provinces were created.
Yeah.
So the continuous undermining and erosion of our rights, in their eyes, to make the land belong to them, has continued on and on, while at the same time we've continued to battle that and fight that. And it's well recorded throughout history, the battles that we had over that, the court cases, all the various things that have happened over time that indicate that we have rights and interests in that territory. And our bottom line has always been, that's our land. That's it, that's all. Right to this day. So now we're at the cusp of settling these issues. How much longer that takes, we don't know. We know that one of the things that I know the province wants to do is they want to bring in the federal government. They want to sit and they want to be part of the discussions that go on. And hopefully, on their part, deals will be cut that will benefit them, And where the input comes in also, and discussions and dialogue definitely have taken place, although they deny it, has been with the surrounding MRC communities, in terms of saying we will commercialize that. We will start the very things that you want, because the the Premier did state that the 4 communities are close to settling and pulling out of the lawsuit that they have against us. So that means that they're making a deal.
Yeah, I mean, their protections
Yeah.
are in place.
Yeah, they're cutting deals for themselves in terms of what they're going to do. And there may be, a tit for tat kind of thing. We'll do this, we'll withdraw, as long as Kahnawake, you give in to something, whatever it may be. We haven't seen that. We don't know what that is. So we may be entering into discussions that will be brought in such a way that they're going to be looking for concessions from us, or situations where we have no choice, backed by the federal government. Okay, that's what I'm anticipating.
Yeah,
Complicated, but you know what? It's I've seen things like that. That's what happened to Kahnawake. That's what happened to them over there. So you can see the same thing starting to evolve here.
Concessions.
Yeah.
Starting from the point where it starts out, was settled historically. I mean, the Gage judgment was one of those indicators that this was land that was our land, and nowhere can you find any record of Kahnawake selling any of the land off. Surrendering any of the land. It's always just been taken piecemeal.
It's what is being called in other parts of Eastern Canada unceded territory.
So what other concessions do they need us to make?
Sign on the dotted line that I guess it's
and
theirs.
just kind of give it all up and take a few bucks for your trouble.
That's it. That's what I see.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about when it's because it's related to this when we came back from the break was a while back. I mean, I 2 weeks ago I wrote a piece for Yurdi and one of the things, I don't know if you caught it at all, but one of the things that I was saying was like, okay, you can run something up the flag post, and whether people salute it is another thing. And one of the things I wondered about is if there was a call for unity in the community, when is the community in all of its parcels, in all of its parts, in all of its factions, going to come together to make a stand on a particular issue? And one of those things is, if you can't make it on our land, then what on earth can you do it for?
Mm-hmm. Well, the whole idea of unity around something like this is going to be the key essential component in terms of not a settlement with Canada and Quebec at this point in time, or more Canada. It's more going to be a question of being able to maintain the kind of understanding that we have on this territory. As I've pointed out on so many occasions, do we want to continue as Kahnawake Reserve number 14, or do we want to now evolve into Kahnawake Mohawk territory?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two issues that are on the table. If it's not Kahnawake Reserve number 14, then we've got a very tough measures that we have to take in order to make sure that Kahnawake Mohawk territory becomes a reality for us. And that means we can only do that as a unified group of people here. Otherwise, that's not going to work. We're going to stay where we are, and we're going to have people infiltrating, coming in, coming out. The whole it kicks into everything. How we view land ownership, who can reside here. All those things become an important factor.
Well, I wanted to segue into that whole thing about the land discussion and a settlement of the grievance, which really, as far as I'm concerned, should only be about revenue sharing on land that's already ours. The resumption of paying for the use of the land, with the returns of any unused lands to us. I mean, that's really all we should be talking about. But from the federal government's position, I just wonder, because everything it comes down to, say, who are the beneficiaries? And who are the beneficiaries gets down to who are we? Yep. And whether you want to label it as membership or you want to say, citizenship, if you want to talk about territories or things like that, then the federal government, I think, is in a battle with us over recognition of their list and their right to determine who is a Mohawk of Kahnawake versus our own right.
Well, as we've often said before, in addition to what we have on the Kahnawake list over here, there's the federal list, which has an additional 4,000 people and counting, you know. And that's a scary thought, to think that at some point in time, because our Kahnawake list is going to be limited, that theirs may the numbers may go up and double what we have here, you know. So that's not a good thing to think about.
Well,
but at the same time,
yeah.
we have to stand our ground on that, you know.
And it also figures into who gets to decide on, say, a discussion, a referendum, for just want of a better expression, and in terms of accepting a settlement offer. Yeah. Who gets a say in that, and who dictates who gets a say over that?
We cannot fall into, you know, the problem right now at the federal level is that this seniority grievance, in a sense, it's good that they've accepted it as a grievance and not a land claim. So we're saying that outright that land belongs to us. It's always belonged to us, and we're going to negotiate and settle on that matter. The problem comes in is that Canada has, they have specific land claim settlement, and they have comprehensive. There's nothing in between that or over above that or besides that encompasses what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they say, well, this is all we have. If you have something that's over $150 million, and it's not something that we can deal with. So they've pigeonholed us into this comprehensive or specific claims process in order to keep the file going and moving. You know, we're at the top of the list. We're at the front of the list for negotiations and discussions with them on this. Yet at the same time, I don't see us going anywhere, because what we want to do and what the policy is right now, they just don't match.
Yeah.
So there has to be some creativity on their part in order to be able to find an accommodation for what we want to do. And then you add the third element, which is the province of Quebec and their point of view, and they're pushing ahead and rushing, you know, to start creating.
But that's the same as even before the negotiations started to take place. They continued building and building developments out in Candiac. I mean, they just propped up in the fields like almost overnight, like mushrooms, because they know. When you talked about whether or not the province, whether it's the Liberals or whether it was their predecessors or whoever down the line, started to talk about that, they're conferring with all of those things about mitigating their liabilities. How we're going to handle this situation, how we're going to handle these people, and what the takeaway is going to be. Don't worry, you guys are going to keep your houses, you're going to keep your municipalities, and so on, and they will settle for it. I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, that seems to be the modus operandi of the federal government over the last 10 years. But you know,
if you one way or another somehow take this issue and create doubts as to whether or not they're sitting solidly on something that they can claim as theirs. If there's title defects, as they call them.
Mm-hmm.
And title defect might be that because it is seigneury land. It is seigneury unsettled land. So you never really have a clear-cut piece of paper that says it's your land. It might be officially issued to you by the province of Quebec, whatever else, but there's still this issue over and above that. That's what we tried to avoid in the past, of getting people upset, creating the situation that we have now, by going and meeting with the MRC, providing them with information on where we would go in the future, and trying to calm the waters in the event that we get to a point where we have a table with the federal government, starting negotiations, that there's not going to be a panic. But what happens as soon as we make a little move, exchange some land, which incidentally they've now said is not part of this master plan that they put together, that is land that is designated for Kahnawake, at this point in time. And that clearly demonstrates the fact that they don't consider lands south of Highway 30 our territory.
Yeah.
Only the pieces that they've returned on the north side, you know.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's going to be whatever they say it is, whatever that's their position,
And,
whether
and
it
what you
comes to
just
that or
pointed
not.
out, in terms of all the construction and businesses and all of that, you'll notice there's a swath of land right in the middle now that's completely open. Everybody's got their eyes on that. That's the prize right now, and that's our territory. They acknowledge it, you know, in principle, but saying, well, until you get a settlement, that's our land, and we can plan and do what we want.
Exactly.
You know, and we'll include you so that you buy in, you give your, you know, you buy into that. Next thing you know, you're saying, yeah, here, take it, it's yours.
Yeah, well, we get down to the point of where we say to the community, well, we did the best we could, with what we got, and this is all we got, and let's make the best of it, and it's money.
And it's, yeah, it comes to the point where you're going to say, well, it's the best deal we could make.
All right.
And that's happened all over the country, and I don't want us to do that.
You're listening to K103 Talk Show, Partline Talk Show, Ross Montour, and I'm with Grand Chief Joe Tokwiro Norton. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with more discussion. Don't go away.
K103.7 FM, your First Nations radio station. Listen live online at www.k103radio.com, on Bell 5 TV, channel 965, and on Paul's Cable, channel 802. K103 is Kahnawake.
Welcome back to today's Partyline Talk Show. If you're just tuning in, it's MCK Friday here, and my guest for the full hour is Grand Chief Joe Tokwiro Norton. And we're talking right now land. We're talking about the provincial government, and we're also talking about some idea of where we might be going. We kind of have a sense of what the province and the surrounding municipalities want to see as an end result to our land grievance, but the more important thing for us is what do we want, and there is already a release out about the outcome of the study that was conducted in the community. I mean, we could touch on that a little bit. The next time Christine Zachary-Diome will be on, and she'll talk in more depth about that. Okay. But the indications, what are they? What I know, one of the things I remember is going back maybe at the beginning of this whole thing, people went and they went and talked to elders and so on. And basically what people were saying at the time was the land, land, land. Okay? They don't talk about anything else, but it's the land. Where are people at with that now?
I don't think it's changed very much. I mean, not just willing to settle for land. There has to be compensation for past use, loss of use of land, the occupation of it now, and what's open and what's available, you know, is basically what we're looking at. And also, I mean, we can ask for the world in terms of how much money we want, and I don't see that happening. But what I do see is partial compensation for the situation, and our ability to be able to utilize that land that's available right now along Highway 30 in order to be able to create our own and generate our own economic wealth.
That's only a question of them acknowledging the fact that it is already ours. I mean, that's not a question.
And whatever we do, how successful we are, will add to their economy.
Okay.
It'll help them, you know, in one way or another. Some people may not want to do that, but, you know, it's kind of like, if you're going to give anything up, it's that sort of thing, a relationship in the area of economic development.
Yeah. I wanted to...
I just wanted to...
Yeah, go ahead, Joe. Good.
One other item is Highway 30 itself. We all know when that was built, during a time of duress. We had guns literally pointed at our head. and they went ahead and they built that. They bypassed all of their rules, all their regulations to put that highway in. Completed it, X number of years later with the exchange of land. There's never been a discussion on that highway itself. That's on our territory. So there has to be, if not a global discussion, with all the other elements, at the very least, there's got to be a separate discussion on that highway.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is on our territory.
Yeah.
It literally belongs to us, if you will.
Yeah.
We never asked for our permission, just went ahead and built it, and that's a bypass around us, but it is on scenery land. Scenery land is part of Kahnawake territory.
Yeah. And that happened. I mean, technically, functionally, it's like an expropriation.
It is,
but
yeah.
technically, it really isn't either. But it's like if the land was expropriated for highways or land was expropriated for bridges, they at least told us we're taking this.
Well, that was in a time and at a time when there was a lot of anger, hatred, and don't give a damn attitude. We'll do what we want to the Mohawks. We'll take their land. We'll build a bypass. That's it. That's all under the no consultation with the federal government. Just go ahead and do it and complete it. And it's not their land.
Yeah,
that's the attitude.
One wonders how much of that sensibility is still residually there, and governments can count on that. Just like generally across the country during the Harper years, media was shaping a certain view about Native people, and provoking a certain sentiment towards Native people, which was, that when are these people going to stop crying? And we've already done enough for them, and so on. But here in Quebec, with anything having to do with our interests, our land, our concerns, I wonder how much of that is still there.
It is there. I don't know how it's been tarnished in recent months with what happened out in Val-d'Or, and they have to tread lightly when it comes to these sorts of issues now. And knowing where we are, knowing where we're located, knowing our ability to generate a lot of I won't use the word hostility, but generate a lot of pushback is the term that I'll use.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be very sensitive to that and know that, we're not just going to sit idly by and allow them to do what they want to do. So, whether the federal government supports us or not, if we have to go it alone, then we'll go it alone. That's all we can do.
I think so, and sometimes in ways we have to think, how do we reach those people, the sort of populace there. I've had instances of talking to people on an individual basis and explaining what our situation is over there with regard to the land and so on, and generally get a more favorable response than, say, blocking a bridge would, or and I think most people have had protests or they've had things like that, have gone to information sharing. Whether those things actually get read. Joe, I don't know if we can move on a little bit to the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, which was recently there was the latest hearing of the tobacco law hearings, and one of the things that I read the report in the newspaper, and one of the things that got me was that, well, okay, I knew that there was wording in the draft of the law which was very fuzzy in terms of things related to membership. And that, of course, came up in that hearing. And one of the things that came out, one of the outcomes was that somebody from the industry indicated, well, we wrote it that way on purpose. And for me, looking at that, I said, why are we in a situation where we're going to invite potential lawsuits in the future within the community? How does, and I'll probably get shot for it, but how does an industry dictate things that would go counter to the will of the community in terms of the idea of the membership law? And I think that's a question of harmonization. One of the things I think about, Joe, is over the years, whenever you and I have talked, I mean, the subject of, say, negotiating a governance agreement with the federal government they've always had their sort of boundaries, their bottom lines, their charter, the constitution, whatever it may be, before you even sit down and talk, as being non-negotiable. And yet, why are we doing it here in our own community when we're making laws? Say, well, you have a membership law. And the membership law, whether we see it as being at the right place right now, resolved or not, it's foundational to everything that we do. It's foundational to the land. It's foundational to how we conduct business amongst ourselves. And I just was really concerned. I'm just curious as to your own observations.
Well, I won't say it's a deal breaker, but it certainly is something that the people and the promoters in the industry of this regulatory piece of movement in the community have to realize that, as you said very clearly, there is an act in place, if you want to call it right now, on membership. It is going through revision. It is coming to its finalization. And in there's provisions in terms of anything to do with who can and who can live here, who can reside here, who can function here. And, if you use that term, Kanien'kehá:ka, then that means the definition of that is the definition in the membership in the membership law. So people have to be aware that it's not just anybody that comes in here that can set up shop. Now, of course, if they want to look at provisions for something like that to happen, then that's what you do. You set aside provisions that say, under certain circumstances, this can happen. But otherwise, this industry and what is being established here is strictly for Kanien'kehá:ka people, and Kanien'kehá:ka people fit a certain.
There's a criteria.
There's a criteria for it, and it's spelled out in the membership regulations. So, for me, there's no question about it.
The same thing would apply. I mean, we were talking earlier about the government list versus our list and the implications that come out of it. Can come out in terms of the land thing. Who are the beneficiaries? Who gets to weigh in on whether a settlement is accepted or not? Who dictates who that is? That's one of the foundational things that we have to deal with. One of the things, here's a question, and I did kind of want to get to this a little bit too, because going back to the election period, conversations that I had with you, and then the conversations that I had with at least one person from a traditional body, it all came to the issue of, well, I hope you'll say to Joe that we hope that the Mohawk Council will find ways to work more closely with the traditional people, and vice versa. And the question here is, what about the traditional people's input? Because the issue of I think when it came to evictions, there might have been, there was, I don't think there was a groundswell of saying, well, we disagree with the law in the community. But where are things at with that? What are the ways that traditional people can have input? One of the things is that traditional people won't go to the community decision-making process. But as bodies, how do we begin to work more closely together? And is it happening?
Well, right at this moment, as we sit here, I'm waiting for a time and a place to meet. We've had letters of exchange prior to the new year, and a response has come back that, we'll meet in the new year. I guess January is running out, so February is now upon us, and March and April, so on and so forth. So maybe via this program, send a reminder that we do need a time and a place and a response. We are prepared to meet, and there's so many issues that are sitting out there, and one of them is the question of who is who in Kahnawake, who can reside here, who's a member, so on and so forth. And we have we've been given notice previously in previous years when I was the Grand Chief at that time. that came from the Grand Council, as well as it's coming from the traditional bodies here in Kahnawake, that there's certain items that they have jurisdiction over and that they're willing to meet with us to discuss these issues. One of them is membership. And we said, fine, let's sit and let's talk. You know, the longer we move along, we meaning the Mohawk Council and the community, in a sense, people that are involved, further we move along down the line in terms of putting together the rules, the regulations, the do's and the don'ts, the more problems it creates if the traditional people are not involved and they're not participating and they're not having their input. And if we hit a wall somewhere, you know, between us, well, you know, years ago they should have been involved. And years ago there's been attempts to do that. They'll counter by saying that, the council never wants to meet with us, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I'll show the letters that we have in which we've made these invitations.
Yeah.
And I don't want to stir the pot, you know, via radio station discussion, but publicly, that's the way it's been. I mean, I don't know what else to do.
Well, the only thing I think about as we close is it's kind of basically what I wrote in my piece. Is like, how do we come to the edge of the woods, remove the barriers, and I think I like the idea of Mohawk territory of Kahnawake becoming an official thing, which sort of removes the whole while you're under Canada's boat discussion, that everybody could then be in the same boat.
You know, declaring Kahnawake jurisdiction.
Yeah.
We need everybody to say, yes, okay, let's do that.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
For an hour. And the news is up next with Brandy Jacobs. You have yourselves a great weekend. Don't forget about Radio Bingo tonight. Big prizes to be had. We'll start the news with Brandy Jacobs, and have yourselves a great weekend. Onagiwahi.
Yeah.